Okay, this is lesson 2 of the 4-day lesson series or the 5-day lesson series. On the agenda for today, students should be getting to know themselves a little bit more as well as their peers and whole class. And they'll be analyzing the school culture and belonging, or the inclusion or lack of inclusion within the school community. The student objective for today is students will be able to define culture and recognize some of the differences and similarities that are developed from culture and other identity traits. So while lesson 1 really focused on the students defining culture, they may not be so much defining it as much today as they were in the first lesson, but they should be developing their understanding and potentially making revisions to the definitions that were made in lesson 1. And the essential question is, what role does culture play in shaping our school community? The skills that are going to be practiced that are both for language arts and cross-cutting. Okay, so we're going to start with the engage portion, or the do now. This should be what gets you started and sets up the lesson for the day. Students will construct a quick write response to the following prompt. What are some behaviors, beliefs, and customs that you and your family have that are important to you? What talents, abilities, and interests do you have that you feel are important or valuable to you? Do you see these celebrated or acknowledged within our school community? Why or why not? Do you want them celebrated in our school community? Why or why not? And how do you think they can be celebrated or recognized more within the school community? So this is really a platform for them to start generating some ideas and thinking about the project before they actually get to the project. So there's a lot of questions in this quick write, and how I do quick writes with my students is that I do generally give a lot of questions, and the questions aren't intended to necessarily be answered in sequential order, and it's like, 1 next, 2 next. They're there to just be looked at collectively in most cases to generate ideas, but for some students, they do need to go through that 1 next, 2 next kind of motion, and both are okay. But sometimes when my students are new to quick writes, they'll look at that and think, oh my goodness, that's a lot to take in. And so I usually tell them, like, you might answer 1 or 2 really well, and that's fine. And so you just kind of have to set those parameters or boundaries for your students and explain that to them. So once they're done with their quick write, the students will individually need to complete a simple questionnaire. This is something that you're going to pass out to the class, and you can pass this out while they're working on their quick write so that you're not taking up a lot of time. It should be anywhere between 5 and 10 questions, and it should be fairly simple to complete. Just keep in mind that the questions that you are creating need to show togetherness and not create, kind of a divide. So I would probably use a Google form for this one, but that's just because I have access to it. But hard copy is also just as great. And you can use the back of the hard copy for them to generate ideas on later. So topics for your questionnaire might include food, music, shows that you like, goals that you have, what's your religion, or what do you practice or believe in, clothing, sports, holidays celebrated, etc. So again, these kind of questions should be generated to bring or to create togetherness. So you might ask, what is your favorite food? What is your favorite dessert? What kinds of music do you listen to? What's your favorite artist? And the idea with this is that later on in this next step is that it's going to show the students commonalities that they have, because sometimes, when I teach middle school, they think, oh, we have nothing in common. We're all so different. And so this is intended to kind of bring them together. So after you have that component, you can have an open discussion with your students regarding this quick write and these questions. But I think I might do it after, but you just kind of have to go in the order that you think. And so for me, sometimes this varies from class to class. So after their quick write, students will engage in a peer discussion. They will talk about the things that they wrote about and note differences and similarities in relationship to the quick write. They can create a T-chart on the back of their quick write or on the back of their questionnaire to note commonalities and similarities, or differences, excuse me. So they'll just kind of be looking at the quick write and the questionnaire. So they'll generate a list, and from that peer list, they can move to whole group and see, what does the whole group have in common? What are some differences amongst the group? So they'll generate that list in the group, move to whole class. This can be done on a poster at the front of class or whatever resource that you have to display that. This will be a reference for the final day or the final project. So while we are trying to find commonalities, what's important to note is that differences are kind of the main focus of this portion, because the final project is them creating something that builds inclusion. So they need to not just focus on the commonalities or the similarities. The differences are just as important in this case. So the differences can be what helps them to generate that event or revise a school policy or revising an event on campus. So they'll need to look at both very reflectively. They can generate this list, whole class up on the board or on the back, or you can have a T-chart created for them separately. So after they've got that list going, they're thinking about each other, they're thinking about the school community, it's time to moving to expanding on those ideas. So they're going to move to this explain portion, and they'll watch a video from YouTube that should get them thinking more about that final project. How do we make students feel included on our campus? How do we make a more welcoming environment and a more inclusive environment? It's designed for them to start thinking both about the project, but how they can implement change on campus immediately. And so you'll just click that link. It'll take you right to the video. I personally don't stop very often during my videos, especially when they're somewhat short, 5 to 10 minutes. I like my students to watch them as a whole. They can take notes, jot notes, questions that we can go back to. So once they've watched the video, they're going to work with their partners in groups again. So they need to, after watching a video, create a list of components that they feel the school does well in integrating the diverse populations at the school. These components can range to meet the students' needs, but remember, it's supposed to be bringing them closer together. So have the students create this list on the back side of one of their T-chart posters. Afterwards, you're going to move from peer and group discussions to whole class discussions, and I've created a list of CFU questions, checking for understanding questions to the right, to help openly generate ideas about what the school is doing well and what they're not doing well, because they're going to need both ideas for their projects. Often what I tell my students, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And so if the school is doing something well, we need to have them utilize that to their advantage. So my questions for my CFUs are over here. How does it feel to be a part of a group? The group in this case being the school that has many shared ideas and beliefs. And so I particularly work at a very diverse school. And so, what is that like for them? How does it feel to be left out of that group? And again, this is going to be helping them build those ideas for that final project. So if they're not belonging to something, what does that feel like? And they need to consider that and be empathetic towards that when they're doing the final project. And what's something that you learned today that you didn't expect to learn? This can be about inclusion. It could be about a peer. It could be about whole class. Any of the discussions that you've had so far. This is also moving into our closure component right here, because that last question is really going to allow you to review the objective, check for understanding, and clarify any miscommunications. Lastly, the exit ticket. This can be done on a Google form or a lined sheet of paper, or if you have exit ticket slips, however that works for you. I personally use Google Forms just because that's what I have access to. So how can we use what we've learned today to make a positive change on campus? That's kind of like their exit ticket quick write. It doesn't have to be long, 1 or 2 sentences. So again, and then extending off of that, what's something that you can do today to make a positive change on campus? And what's something that you can help change over time? And that's going to be leading us back to, or excuse me, not leading us back to, but leading us into our final project. And that would be the close for lesson number 2.